Marcus, thanks very much for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, John, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. Um, for those in the audience, this will be the first ever special episode of the Curious Ulsterman podcast. And man, I can't think of a better guy to have than Marcus. So I've been lucky enough to have a chat with him over the past few months and get to know his story. And the moment I conceptualized the idea of having like a special episode with interesting stories to tell, he was the first person I thought of. So I got a lot of value from being friends with him, and I'm sure you will get value from the stories he'll share today. For those of you who are just joining and perhaps haven't watched the trailer, this special is, as I just said, it's going to be doing a deep dive into special people's stories. And the key outcome here is that you're going to be inspired and motivated and realize that we've all got something going on, but it's all about how you break through those barriers or those things keeping you down and ultimately succeeding in the end. So, yeah. So, what I would like to start with, Marcus, is what is your story?
That's a interesting question right off the bat. um, well, first of all, thanks so much for having me and considering me interesting. Like that means a lot to me. Um, but no, so I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I did 6 years, 3 as a medic, 3 as an infantryman. Um, Yeah, I went right out of high school with that into the army. And then while I was in the army, I got married. So, I mean, from 17, 18 on to about 22, I was just sort of living that life. I didn't really have a chance to do my own thing. I was kind of at the mercy of the waves, so to speak. Um, so I never really got a chance to develop my own personality, really. I mean, as a whole. Um, Going back a little further than that, I grew up in a household that to me was extremely normal, but turns out, as I'm finding out later in my adult life, it wasn't so normal. Uh, Dad's an alcoholic. Mom is sort of an enabler in those sorts of things, which in later on in life she enabled my alcoholism, but we'll get into that. So yeah, to me that was normal. I thought every kid dealt with parents fighting loudly, smashing out headlights of the car with a baseball bat, like those sorts of things. But turns out it's not. But anyway, so yeah, I got out of the army in 2011 and got divorced that same month in 2011,
Oh,
early 2011. So basically, all of my structure, all of my accountability, internal and external, kind of just went away at the same time. And prior to that, I went to Iraq in '06 and '07 and kind of developed a little bit of a some mental issues from that I had to deal with through like certain types of trauma. I won't get into too much detail on that, but PTSD, it's there from that. And yeah, so I just sort of once everything went away in the form of structure and accountability, I just sort of I don't know how to describe it. I kind of went off the rails for a while. I um I got really selfish. That's the best way that I can describe it in hindsight. I really let my drinking control me. I was crashing on people's couches because I lost everything in the divorce. I lost my house, bank accounts, cars. I had gotten 2 DUIs prior to that, so I didn't even have a driver's license. Like it was just a bad time for me in those respects. But I was partying every night, so in the moment it didn't seem so bad, right? Because I was drunk all the time, so I didn't
mm.
understand. I didn't understand the gravity of how bad it really was, until later in life, like a decade later, essentially, almost a decade later, I'm starting to realize how bad I actually got. But yeah, all that fell apart. And then from 2011 um, to about 2013, those 2 years there, I just sort of traveled the United States. I lived in upstate New York with my cousin. crashed in his apartment above his garage, working construction, drinking all the
Mm.
time. I moved to Seattle to attend an underwater welding school, um, drinking all the time. That's the common thread you'll find
Yeah.
in my story up until about 2 years ago, is drinking all the time. Um, I squandered Seattle. I lived there for 9 months, just wasted that time. Moved to Austin, Texas for a while after that, drinking all the time, working for Saves the Children. I was street canvassing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was an interesting job. Left that job, came back to Kentucky, which is where I'm currently living, my home state, and started working on a horse farm, which was actually pretty awesome. But again, drinking all the time. So in June 2016 is when everything sort of like really fell apart. I was alone working on this horse farm and drunk every day, every night. And one day I just had a mental breakdown, which I guess I should say prior to um, that I had alienated all my friends, right? So I didn't have anybody to speak to. When I say alone, I mean alone. Thought I preferred it. I was wrong. Um, but whatever. Hindsight was 2020.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, I had the mental breakdown. And my boss, an Air Force Vietnam veteran, he looked at me and he says, "Hey, either you go get help or like you're out of here." Right. So I said, okay. I went to a 28-day inpatient alcohol like addiction treatment facility at the VA. I did a 28-day program and signed up for a 45-day program immediately after that. So I did 70 some odd days total with that. When I got out of that, I went back to the horse farm. Turns out my boss had given my job away and the
Oh
apartment I was
man.
living in. He actually had the new guy living in my apartment. So it was like he was like, "I didn't know you were coming back." I was like, "Bro, what are you doing?" So I mean, I was sober. I was dry. I hadn't drank
Yeah.
any in 70 days, which was new for me. It had been years since I'd done that. And I went 2 weeks. I made it 2 weeks before I got drunk and ruined everything again. And he said, "Okay, you're out. Peace." So thus starts my homeless escapades. I uh, I was homeless for sure. Like there was nowhere to go. Um, and so I went to the VA. I was like, "Hey, let me do another inpatient program." They said they said you can't because you just did one. So go to this organization. I went to this organization called Volunteers of America and stayed there for 6 months. Just stayed dry, still not quite sober, because I find there's a difference there. Like it's a mindset thing, for me.
Mm-hmm.
And still thought that I was different, still thought that I was special. I wasn't really, oh, I don't want to do AA. AA is not going to work for me. Like all of these meetings and stuff, that's not going to work for me. I'm different, which was incorrect in the grand scheme of things. Suffering is suffering, whatever it is. There is
Mm-hmm.
nothing that I can suffer that another human being hasn't already done. Like it's not going to happen. So before I hadn't realized that at that point. But anyway, so I stayed there for 6 months, got out, and I moved into low income housing that the VA had set up for me, which at first was cool, except for on my way out of the facility to my new apartment, I got a bottle and a case of beer and went right back to same habits.
Yeah.
So that year that I spent in low income housing after that was just that was the lowest of lows for me. I
Yeah.
except I met a person while I was there. He was 6'3",
Hmm.
a uh, a black guy, cross dresser,
Right.
prostitute, homosexual prostitute.
Okay.
And during the day, we would hang out and smoke weed and play Jeopardy, on like a video game version of Jeopardy, and just talk about things. And at night, he had to work, right?
Yeah.
He put on his wig and put on his dress and had work to do. So I didn't ask questions about that. Now, it was good for a while, up until finally I experimented with meth, which, bad idea. Never do that. Especially if you're already a paranoid individual like myself with the PTSD. Meth is bad. Okay, we've we've determined that. And
Yeah.
I also tried crack at the time, and
Mm.
another bad drug. Don't do it. There's nothing good that can come from those drugs. So yeah, that year was interesting. At the end of that year, my lease ran up, and I was like, okay, something's got to give, like, at one point, I mean, this is something that a lot of people don't know about me. At one point during that year, I was so broke and had no food in my house. I ate dry dog food in order
My
to
good grief.
sustain myself. Yeah. So it was dry dog food too, like it
Oh
was
no.
not even the wet dog food, that you can deal with if you're in like a fallout shelter or something. But now this was
Oh
dry
man.
kibble. So it was a low moment for me
Yeah.
for sure. So that year goes up, and I go back to the VOA, and I do another 6 months. Now, during this 6 months, things are going great. I get back into running. Like, I had always kind of been into running since the army, but never really seriously gotten into it. But this second 6 months of being homeless, living in a homeless shelter, I decided to start running again, because I mean, they wouldn't let me work for the first month or two, because you had to go to all these AA meetings and you had to follow a program and do all this stuff, which is good. I got that structure back, right?
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize at the time, but now I realize I sorely needed that structure. So I get back into running. My health is kicking up. Mental health is starting to do well. In 6 months, I'm like, okay, I got this. That was my first mistake. I said, I got this, which I left, and then I moved into a house with a couple of roommates, and just right back to the same crap. Like, on the way out of the homeless shelter, I stopped and got a bottle, right? And then I went and got
Yeah.
a bag of weed. Excuse me, which is right back to the same crap. But I thought I had it, I thought I was doing well. I lived in this place for, I don't even know, maybe like 4 months, 5 months, not that long, until my roommates were like, hey, bro, we're done with you. Like, you're no good for this place. And, that was fine. I held some resentments against them for a long time, but I'm over that now, because I realized how big of a bag of shit I really was. Like, I was selfish. I'd squander my rent money on booze. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I was the worst roommate on the planet. Um, So then I went back to the 45-day inpatient program at the VA, just so that I could honestly figure some things out and save up some money for a month, so that I could like get my own place. And while I was there, man, I went through what's called prolonged exposure therapy, and
Mm.
it's like super intense. If you want to talk about it, we can, but it's super intense stuff. And that kind of something clicked for me in doing that therapy. And it hurt. It mentally hurt, but that's what I needed. But so I left that program, went down to my hometown, Corbin, Kentucky, and moved into an apartment. And go figure, I went right back to the same patterns, except this time I felt bad about it. I went right back to drinking and smoking, but I just felt like, ugh, I'm so tired of this, like I was finally just over it. But I kept doing it anyway, because I'm an addict.
Yeah.
But that shame and that guilt is what really helped me to, like, once something finally did happen, which in my case, I met the right girl. She moved in across the hall from me, and then struck up a relationship. Um, but yeah, like that, when that one thing came, that's when I was ready for it to change, you know? And that was almost 3 years ago now. So since then, I've been back in college, just finished up my bachelor's, um, going for my master's, got a baby on the way, living in a house, like not homeless. So things are looking up, and I'm sober. So things are looking up.
That's an incredible story. I mean, like I've heard bits and pieces of that, but that's the first time I ever heard the full story. And there was like, gosh, I could chat for hours about that, but there's so much to unpack. But something I do want to have a chat about is that lone wolf mentality and that not asking for help. So, what describe what was going through your mind at the time that you didn't need help, that you could handle it when clearly you couldn't. Clearly, something was very wrong. But what was going through your mind at the time that you wouldn't seek help? Because there's so many people in this position, whether that's alcoholism or drugs or pick your addiction, who say, I don't have a problem and they refuse to seek help for it. What's what was it that, you know, made you resist getting help?
Pride,
Pride.
full on. It had to be the pride. Ego. My ego was enormous. Like, don't get me wrong, I still have a pretty massive ego, but now it's a little different. But then, I mean, I was so prideful. Like, I was supposed to be this army veteran. I'd been to war, you know, like I'd conquered all these things, and plus I would justify my drinking as well, you know. Like I would go run 5 miles and then binge drink for the rest of the night and be like, no, it's cool. My health's fine. I'm still running 5 miles every like other day. Like I'm good. So I would find these little tricks to just justify it instead of
Yeah.
like owning up to it, you know. But then another thing for me too was anger. Like there was a point for me where um, religion became an outlet for me. Like not religion, like going to church, but hating religion. Like
Yeah.
I had qualms with God. Like I was mad at God. And then I got mad at myself because I was like, I had this idea that God doesn't exist. And then somebody said, well, if God doesn't exist, how can you be mad at him? So I had this big existential like shit show going on in my head, and I
Yeah.
didn't know what to do with it, right? So I was just angry all the time. I was living outside of my own integrity, and then that caused me to just be mad all the time. And then but the pride for real, man, like I had it in my mind that I should be able to handle this crap. And that kept me from going out and getting help. And I was mad at the world, man. I was so
Yeah.
mad.
Yeah. There's so many people like that. And I must admit, like, I think I went through a small, thankfully, very small phase where, like, I was quite angry for a lot for just anything really, and that was just my being very stressful at work, and you know, uh, people being like, you know, you're working 100 hours a week. Are you sure you're all right? Yes, of course I'm all right. I can handle this. You know, yeah, and make every excuse under the sun. Thankfully, that didn't last too long, but yeah, I mean, it might be. I don't know if you could recall, but what what finally got rid of that anger? What was the moment? I know you described in detail, you know, the moment you kept going back to the VA and asking for help, but you know, what was the moment that you got rid of that pride, that ego, and that anger?
I still deal with it.
You still deal with
Like
it. Okay, that's
Oh, for
interesting.
sure. Yeah,
Talk
like
about
on
that, please.
occasion, man. It's just I reframe the way I use it. Like used
Okay.
to, it was an excuse to be shitty. Used to is an excuse to go off and do these things like, oh well, I'm angry, like so I'm gonna just do whatever. But now it's like if I look at myself and I say I'm angry at the world, then I can either use it as an excuse to be a victim, or I can use it as fuel to be better. It's like, okay, I see this problem with society. I see this problem with this. Like, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to mope and cry about it, or am I going to just go get better? So now, instead of getting me all down in the dumps, it pumps me up, because I'm like, okay, now that I've seen the problem that I feel like is a problem, now it's just my perception of what a problem may be.
Mm.
Then I'm able to start formulating a solution. Whereas before I just used it as, oh, there's so many problems. Why do anything? Like it's it's nihilism. It was a form of nihilism for me. Like nothing matters. So why do anything different? Whereas now it's like everything matters, you know? So do everything different. I don't know. It's just a reframing of it. But on occasion, man, like I'm really hard on myself. Like borderline perfectionist, where
Yeah.
sometimes I actually go full on perfectionist. And I've found that I actually had an instructor tell me not long ago that perfect is the enemy of done.
Mm.
And that stuck with me, because sometimes I want to be perfect at things to the point to where I won't even start it, because I know that it won't be perfect. So why even do it? Which is stupid. Like
Yeah.
that's just a dumb attitude to have. But yeah, I still get angry at certain things, but now I just channel it, because I'm
Yeah.
still an addict, right? Like I still have that addict personality. So like I'm super high energy. Um, like things just I've just had to reframe it.
Yeah.
Like, and running has been a huge outlet in those terms, because running is something that I'm addicted to it. Like if I go a couple days without running, I get headaches. I turn into a miserable little boy. Like you can ask my wife, she'll vouch for me. I turn into just a pile of crap. But you know, it's another addiction. But with this one, there's no legal ramifications for running too much. So it's not as bad, I guess.
Yeah, I really like that, and I really find that interesting how you haven't got rid of the mindset, so to speak. Like the addict mindset is still there, but rather than it ruining your life, you've now turned it into a tool that benefits you and the people within your sphere of influence. Because that's something quite maybe naively of me, that I thought that you go to rehab and you get rid of the mindset, but from what I'm gathering, it's a reframing of the mindset now, so that like you're still you, like before rehab and after rehab, you're still you, but quite clearly something has changed. And if I'm hearing you correctly, that change is reframing your thoughts and ideas in such that they no longer control you and your negative addictions. They they feed off your negative addictions. You now reframe it that it's you turn them into tools, and those tools that you apply to positive addictions potentially, if I'm getting this correctly, even if it's just your circumstance, and like the results from your life are just incredible. Like going from, quite frankly, being homeless and an addict to doing exceptionally well in university with a wife and a child on the way and a stable home. It's just been an incredible transformation.
Oh yeah, and I think that's one of the big problems with the mental health sector, especially here in America. I can only speak for it here. Is that um, there's this idea that we need to fix something, which the only time you ever need to fix something is if something is broken.
Yeah.
So addicts are treated, and addicts and alcoholics, if you want to separate the two, which I don't, but um, we're treated as if something is broken within us. Where I was having a conversation with a guy, I remember years ago, in a program I was in, and I came to this conclusion that even guys with PTSD, like especially the military um, PTSD, is like we're enhanced. We are enhanced individuals, because we have this ability we have extreme focus. We just haven't figured out what to focus on. For me,
Mm.
I focused on the booze, because it took away all of the different, like my mind was going 100 miles an hour. So when I would drink, it would slow that down. But I don't need to slow it down. I just need to channel it into something. So I mean, that's why now, like my wife will even ask me sometimes, or she'll mention to me sometimes, like if I'm on a break between semesters, or if I've got like a week off, she's like, so what are you going to work on? And, or something like that, like you can't sit still. Like I spent a week just recently because of the holidays sleeping in. I felt like the biggest piece of crap on the planet. Like I started getting down on myself. I was like, nah, like I gotta fix this, just because I
Yeah.
would sleep in a couple days, or I took 5 days off of running to let my body sort of like repair itself. And then I started getting like mad at myself, which is, it's silly, but I gotta, as an addict, and as anybody who can be obsessive, because we can all be obsessive about things if we find something we're interested in.
Hmm.
We just got to be mindful of it, that we have that mindset. Once you become mindful of it, if something tends to go too far in one direction, then when you're mindful of it, you're able to say, okay, this is the sign that that's going too far. I need to pump the brakes,
Yeah.
pivot, or just figure out what I need to do so that I don't go off the rails like I did last time. You got to learn from it.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Simple
Yeah.
but not easy.
Yeah, and I mean, what I really like about this story is just how humanizing it is, and I like what you said about how addicts, regardless of the addiction, are treated as broken people. Um, something I was watching recently, I seen that new series, what was it, New Amsterdam? I think it's based off a medical drama series set in New York. And there's a psychiatrist in it, and he's dealing with a young troubled youth. And she says, I was broken and you fixed me. And he said the very nice line, "You were never broken." And I kind of like that. I mean, I don't know if you would disagree with me in that, but like, I don't know if I would see addicts as broken people at all. I would maybe say, coming from a place of I've never been an addict, and touch wood, whatever circumstances in life, I would never, succumb to that. But um, perhaps it is just a wrong frame of mind. That is essentially what the addict is potentially suffering from, and clearly from what you said that when you went through rehab, it was that reframing of the mind that you're not going to change your personality of the addict personality, or you're on the go all the time, or you need something to intently focus on. If that's not going to change, why not just pivot and put it into something good that will immensely benefit you? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing on that, like our society has this framework of, well, I don't want to say everyone, that's very generalizing, but like there's this framework of addicts are broken people, but that is becoming perpetuated through pop culture. Like I drive down the street and my wife likes to listen to the radio. I don't. I despise the radio. I'm a music snob, so be it. But she likes to listen to the radio. And it's all these songs about like we're supposed to be happy all the time, or comfort is king, or like things like I'm broken and now we're two broken people who have found each other. And it just
Yeah,
irks me. Like I'm sure I get on
yeah,
her nerves because I'm like always critiquing music like on the radio. I'm like, this is why this is crap. And just,
yeah.
yeah, I'm sure it gets annoying. I probably get extremely annoying to be around. But anyway, like our culture perpetuates it. And I don't know if there's any big shadowy hand in the background trying to push these agendas, for control or whatever. Like I'm not a conspiracy, QAnon, any of that stuff. But like it's become so normal and so accepted to be a victim that not only does pop culture perpetuate this stuff, but addicts and veterans with PTSD and anybody who's gone through trauma and has PTSD, like we are taught this stuff and we perpetuate it. Like I'm just as guilty as of perpetuating that stereotype because for the long time I was the angry veteran, right? Like I
Yeah,
was the guy who was like, "Oh, don't set off fireworks because I'm going to jump behind the couch and hide." And like going door to door, "Hey, don't set off your fireworks because you live next to a veteran," or putting a sign in my yard, some kind of
yeah,
craziness like that. Or nobody should be drinking around me. because they should know that I'm an alcoholic and I can't handle it, or it's going to trigger me, or some
Yeah.
crap. Like, I used that and I felt justified in using those excuses. Like, I mean, I guess that's a form of virtue signaling if we really want to start getting into that. But like, it was, I had accepted the fact that I was a victim, and I broadcast it to the world. I'm a
Yeah.
victim, you know? And now looking back on it, I'm like, it disgusts me about myself. I'm like, ugh, I can't believe I did that. So
Yeah.
now, if I catch myself doing that, I try to reframe my mindset, and like, just, I fix myself. Like, if I can find something about myself to fix, then I won't perpetuate that message, right?
Yeah.
Because I can't fix anybody else. I can't fix anybody else's mindset. Like, I can't go into their brain and rewire their
Yeah.
circuitry. However, I can do mine, and I can represent a better idea of the culture that, you know, hopefully somebody will be like, oh, hey, that's a good idea. I'm going to reframe my mindset to go with that mindset because it's better. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's a soapbox.
No. Well, actually, it touches on an interesting subject. So what I get from that is that, take personal responsibility and your own accountability. And so with that in mind, how is your mindset and your life changed then since you cast off the victim card and maybe, I hope I'm using the right term here, be a victor like in everything?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It has been a gradual shift. I've never, like, I can name off some specific events that helped me along the way, but it's been very, very gradual. Like, so gradual, I'm still working on it. Like, I still journal, and I still study stoicism. Like, I daily, like every single day, it's something that I have to do. Meditate. I know that you like to meditate, and you can speak to the power of meditation, but like, the mindset shift that really changed to me was I had to stop worrying about what other people thought about me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I was so egotistical, and like, I thought that everybody was looking at me, right? Like, I thought that everybody was judging me, and like, I couldn't do what I really deep down wanted to do because it was stupid. Like, it would look silly to people. And like, I just finally came to a point where I stopped caring about what anybody thought about me. And I really did a deep dive of like, okay, who do I want to be? Like, what do I want to do? And so I went looking for people, right? On Instagram, on social media, like, what is that guy doing that I'd like to emulate? Not their, I don't want to emulate them and be them, but like, what aspects of that individual would I like to take and make my own? So I made a
Yeah.
list. I made a list, like discipline, courage, all of these other things, you know, like these good attributes that I wanted to embody that I hadn't quite embodied yet. And then I just went down the list figuring out how I could become that person. So I
Yeah.
guess the mindset shift that came with that was I had to become willing to learn, you know, like, I had to accept the fact that I was ignorant in most things, right? I know
Mm.
it maybe sounds like a little like I beat myself up, which I do, you know, because I'm happy, not content, right? But like, I had to accept the fact that I was ignorant, yes, but also capable of fixing that through any means necessary. Like, if I want to learn how to be a better husband, guess what? I need to go find some guys who I see that are good husbands. I need to talk to them. If I need to go read a book, like the five love languages, I need to listen to that book. Admittedly, I've not finished it yet. I'm like 39% through the audio book, but you know, I still work at it.
Yeah.
So it's changing that mindset for me. I had to get tired of being mediocre. I had to get tired of being tired. You know, I had to be ready for it. And you can't force that. I think that comes through just having enough pain. I had to be tired of the pain.
Yeah.
self-inflicted or otherwise, you know.
Well, that's some really good insights there. And I think, just from this conversation, the biggest thing I'm taking away from, shedding that victim mentality is that it's liberating, because you can suddenly take a very clear and unbiased view of all your faults. And now it's liberating because you can do something about it. You
Well,
can
it
take
it
charge of your
is
health and everything else.
it is liberating, but not at first.
Oh,
At first
agreed.
it
Agreed.
Yeah, at first it sucks because you're labeling all of the shit that you don't like about yourself, which hurts the ego. But you got to tear it down to build it back up, you know? And for me, there's a quote from Eat, Pray, Love, that movie. And she says, ruin is the road to transformation. I don't know if she took that from somewhere else or whatever, but that hit me. Ruin is the road to transformation. Like, we tear it down to change it, to build it up. And we can change things. Like, once we tear it down and it's back down to zero, we can change it to however we want it to be.
Yeah.
And that's the liberating part. But for me, that took a couple years to even
Yeah.
get to that place. And some days I still wake up feeling sorry for myself.
Yeah. It's only human though, isn't it? And I mean,
Absolutely.
it's the fact though that the majority of the time, you know, you do take charge of your day and your mindset, and you don't subscribe to the victim mentality. You're your own man, and you know exactly what you want, and you're going to go get it. But it's interesting what you say about it took a couple of years. So, I was going to ask, what was the penny drop moment that everything changed? But would you say that in your own case, or in most cases even, that it's not a penny drop moment, it is a gradual shift, or maybe even a bit of both?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's a bit of both. Like, for me, it's been 2 years ish of like consistent daily work, but those 2 years started one day, right? One
Mm-hmm.
day I had to be like, okay, I'm tired of this, and then I had to decide to make the change. So that decision, I remember when that decision happened. Um, I was in my apartment. It was me and my wife, who um, we were engaged at the time. Like, I had just proposed to her, and I was still drinking, but not
Mm-hmm.
as heavy as I was, but I was still drinking. And she she basically gave me an ultimatum, which normally in relationships those don't really work out. Like, it's not a good thing, but she basically was like, you need to quit drinking or I'm out of here. Like, this is ridiculous. And I don't blame her. Like, she should have done that before we even got together. Either you don't drink or we're not
Yeah.
going to be together. But like that, I was ready for that, because I was so fed up with my own bullshit. Like, I was so tired of being me that I was ready to change. I just didn't know how, or I didn't have anything to change for, because I was too
Mm.
weak to realize that I needed to change for myself. So, like, when she said that, I was like, okay, that's what I needed, a swift kick. And then from that day on, like, I've fallen short numerous times
Mm-hmm.
from that moment to now. But
Yeah.
I remember, I'll never forget that moment, because that moment started the path for me. It started this whole journey.
Nothing. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, I suppose moving on from that, what I would say, and you probably already answered this question quite in detail, but in perhaps broad strokes, how has your life changed after that penny drop moment and the consistent work of 2 years, compared to where you were 5, 10 years ago, compared to where you are now? Like, what is it black and white, or is it, not as maybe as black and white, perhaps, like the two extremes? Like, how does it look?
Well, I think a really good way to illustrate that would be to compare a day in my life now to a day
Yeah.
in my life 5 years ago.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I would wake up at about 5 years ago. I would wake up at maybe 11, maybe noon,
Mm-hmm.
hungover from the night before, where I drank until about 4 a.m. or later, or I hadn't even been asleep yet. It just depended on the day. maybe a typical Tuesday or something. And then I would wake up, nurse the hangover, and then try to find more booze or money to get booze if I was broke, or maybe some weed so that I can kill the hangover, or whatever the case may be. I was basically always looking to either drink or cure a hangover. That was
Yeah.
it. And then if I didn't have any money to do any of the stuff, I would just lay in bed literally all day with my laptop on my chest watching Netflix and feeling sorry for myself. Oh, nobody loves me. Pity poor me.
Mm.
Now, if I look at a day, we'll say Monday, this past Monday, get up in the morning at, early ish, 6 or so, 7. And then I'll make some coffee. I've been making pour over coffee. So I take my
Okay.
time with my coffee, and then I journal, I meditate. And for the past 3 weeks, I've been running about 4 or 5 half marathons a week.
Oh
So,
wow.
and just for the past couple weeks, so I'm on a big training high right now. So I'm just busting them out. And then so Monday I woke up, ran a half marathon, which is 13.1 miles. I don't know how many K that is. Um, so did that, come home, take a shower, and then I'm already working on stuff for my master's program, which starts next month. I got my reading list for all my classes, and I've been trying to read through the books before classes start because I got a baby on the way, and he's coming in April. So I can't be clogging up all my time in the first semester reading all these books, right? So I need to utilize my time now as best as I can. So, I mean, can you see the difference?
Oh, yeah. I think black and white is the only description there, isn't it? Um, that's phenomenal to hear. But something I do want to ask you about is how do you balance this all? How do you balance running all these half marathons? How do you balance going back to university or college for the Americans? How do you like even like your marriage is going to take up your time, the kid's going to take up your time. Like where do you find the time in your day to balance all this?
Everybody's got the same 24 hours, right? For me, it's just about, I got to put it on paper.
Yeah.
If I put it on paper, and like, I'm not talking about this is my to-do list. I'm talking like from from this minute to this minute, I'm doing this. From this minute to this minute, I'm doing this. And man, my buddy Akshay Nanavati, he's got a book called Fearvana. I highly suggest it. Follow him on Instagram. He's a extraordinary guy.
Yeah.
But he talks about this thing where he changes his mask, right? Like you put on, if you're going to be doing family stuff, you put on your family mask. And not, well, I guess the mask probably could be misconstrued. Like
Yeah.
you're not faking it, right? You're putting, it's more of a hat, right? I'm going to put
Yeah.
on my work hat, going to put on my church hat, going to put on my whatever hat, my running hat. But if it's a scheduled time to do this scheduled thing, I'm doing that thing, right? So it's about practicing that, switching your mindset to be in each thing as mindful as possible. And then by the end of the day, I've worn 6 different hats doing 6 different things, making progress in 6 different areas, and then get some good sleep, eat some good food, drink a crap ton of water, and then wake up the next day and do it all over again, but planning it and then being mindful in each task, that's the only way. And if I'm being 100% honest, sometimes I fail with the balance. And I know that I'm failing when I start falling short in any area, right? Like if my wife looks at me and she's just pissed and I can't figure out what it is, it's usually because I've neglected something in that.
Yeah.
Or if I'm reading on a book and it's something that was written in the 1960s by this guy from Oxford, and he's just talking about something that, and I have to read the same paragraph maybe 6 or 7 times before I can move on, then there's something wrong in my mindset, right? There's something plaguing me. So that means that I got to take a step back, reevaluate, figure out where that imbalance has occurred and then fix it, move forward.
Yeah. That's interesting. So you're always taking charge of the day. You're being proactive with your day rather than being reactive to it. And not only
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
you're adapting to your day as well. Like I love how adaptable that is in that, you recognize it. Life does throw curveballs and we're also human and we don't perform at 100% and we probably never will. But the fact that you can take a step back, recognize where you could have potentially done better, implement it so the next day you are doing better. I mean, like, it's no wonder you're winning in most areas of your life. So, you know,
Appreciate it.
yeah. I mean, gosh, I could talk for hours here on just about
Well,
everything,
just
but
one more thing with just one more
yeah,
thing on that too,
yeah.
man. Like, also being aware that I'm gonna die
Okay,
someday.
let's
You
explore
know,
that. Yeah.
yeah, death meditations are a big deal. Like, I do the daily Stoic, and I've been doing it for a year now, like a full year.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole month has been about death, like memento mori. Remember, you're
Memento
gonna
mori.
die. Yeah,
Yeah.
as soon as we're born, our time is numbered. It's limited. So if we're not taking advantage of that, then damn, we're cheating ourselves. So like, if I remember, not in the fact like I got to rush and do all this crap, because I'm all about quality over quantity, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it
Preach.
may sound like I'm into the quantity, which I am, but I'm trying to do a whole bunch of really, really awesome stuff, and I'm trying to do it very well. So that takes mindfulness, but it also takes a reminder of like, okay, too much screen time, for example. I am guilty of that. Like,
Yeah. Same.
checking my likes on Instagram and all that. Like, sometimes, like, I catch myself, or my wife catches me. That's even better. And she's like, "Hey, you just gonna sit over there on your phone all day?" And I'm like, "You're right." Like,
Yeah.
is this where you want to be when you have a heart attack at 88 years old, flipping through Instagram? Nah, I'd rather
Oh
be
wow.
playing with grandkids. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That
Great
hit me
grandkids.
That hit me hard. That one. Is this where you want to be when you're 85 and have a heart attack scrolling through Instagram? That's. I'm gonna have to dwell on that one. But
I
yeah,
think it would do all of us good to think about that,
yeah.
including
The
myself.
Yeah, so for the audience, wholly recommend the Daily Stoic. Absolutely fantastic resource. And yeah, I do every so often do catch saying to myself memento mori as well. To remind me that, if I'm, sweating the small stuff and I'm like memento mori, it's like, look at the bigger picture. And seize the day with all you've got. But yeah, that's more wisdom from yourself there. And I think the only thing, circling back a bit, that I'd like to ask is, and I'm going to get really real here, for any like potential addicts or people down in the dumps, or like life is just kicking you down at the moment, what advice do you have for people who were in a similar situation to you, or just like life is just knocking them 2 for 6 at the minute? Like, what's your advice to them?
Everything is temporary.
I love
Nothing,
that.
nothing lasts forever, and that's the good and the bad, right? Like, happiness, it's good when it's there, but it's temporary. It will go away. The same with sadness. The same with anger. The same with anything. And I find that the cure to feeling down, to feeling like the world's just on top of you, is action. Go do something. Like, whether that's just dropping down and doing 10 push-ups, taking 6 deep breaths, go run 15 miles, like whatever. Go run 15 feet, like do something. Just take action. That is going to change perspectives, like, every single time. It never fails. Just do something. But
Yeah.
also remember, what you're feeling right now will go away with
Yeah.
time.
Take messy action.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Doesn't
Like,
you
it
don't
doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah, just do
No, just
something.
just do something. Yeah. I really like that. And something else you touched on about this will pass. One of my favorite quotes from Marcus Aurelius, big on stoicism, is that, this too shall pass. Doesn't matter. Apply that to anything, And I really like that because, especially, I had a fantastic road trip this year around the north coast of Scotland. And it's probably the happiest I've been in a long time. Just like, window down, traveling sun blazing down in the remote highlands of Scotland, and I couldn't remember a time I've been more happy. And I sort of thought to myself, it's a bit sad that this is going to end. But then I said, this too shall pass. And I sort of thought to myself, well, no, I'll just appreciate this moment and stop worrying about the fact that this is going to end. Just be present in this moment. I didn't need an Instagram to record it. I didn't need, I was just there with myself, content in my bones and my soul and my mindset, loving life. And, then there's also the days that I just feel bloody terrible, quite frankly, for no good reason. It's like, well, it's all right because this too shall pass. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, but it's not permanent, which is so liberating as well.
Oh, for sure, man. Everything goes away.
Yeah. And the final question I have for you, after everything you've been through and all the success you've had, what does the future look like for you now?
The future. Well, I try not to put too much stock in what I want the future to look like because it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, So I try to, it's like a mural, right? Like when a
Mm-hmm.
when a muralist is painting this huge freaking mural, they'll make it into a grid system, and then they'll focus on each little block at a time, right? So if you take your time and focus on each individual block,
Mm-hmm.
by the time you're down to this last block, you're going to have this amazingly beautiful picture with full of just amazing little details, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I had to speculate on what my future will look like,
I like that.
I want to own a ranch. I want to have farmland.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have a bunch of kids running around all the time. I want to have a house with no house payment. like
Don't we
that's the
all?
thing. I don't have to build it, but I want it to be paid off.
Yeah.
All of those financial things will be taken care of. I won't have to worry about all that stuff that way because it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You get
Mm.
all those base things filled out, which that's what I'm working at right now. That's when you can get up to self-actualization and really start working on the shit that matters, you know? Like happiness isn't the end all be all. However, it's pretty damn nice sometimes, and that only comes from not having to worry about food, water, shelter, love, blah, 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 all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll have some books out. Like I'll be writing books and I'll be a tenured professor at a university somewhere and I'll be doing all that. I'll have a podcast going. I'll have, I'll be running ultra marathons and people will be like, "Oh, hey, there's that 60-year-old guy running 100 miles." Like, cool. And
That's that's awesome. I love the ambition. And with a man with your mindset, I've no doubt that you'll achieve it.
I appreciate
So
that.
so given your incredible story will no doubt inspire people listening to this and they'll go, well, I want more of this. So where can they find you if they want to hear more of your content?
Yeah, so right now I'm only on Instagram, Marcus A. Thornton, all one word, um, at Marcus A. Thornton, I guess is the thing. And I tend to post mostly about like running, things of that nature, but I always try to tie in some motivational stuff to it or whatever the case may be. So you can definitely follow me there. That's where I'm pretty much active all the time. So
Perfect. And I'll also provide that link in the show notes as well. So for those of you on your phones, you can just simple click and you can go to his profile, and well, get motivated, go out and kick ass in life. Um, Marcus, it's been an absolute privilege to have you on the podcast, and I'll hopefully have you back on again sometime soon. But once again, thank you so much for coming on today.
oh man, it's been a true honor. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks very much, pal.
Yeah, thank you.